Hi, this is Shayan Chakraborty. Currently, I am doing my master's from RMIT University, Melbourne, and I am recording this video for my CPS project. So, this video will consist of four projects which I did for the last month. This week's theme is observation. To me, observation means more than looking at something. It is about paying close attention to everyday spaces, objects, routines, emotion, and pattern, and then reinterpreting them through a personal creative response. Observation allows an artist to find meaning in ordinary things that people usually might overlook.
Romantic painters used observation in a similar way when creating landscape. Artists like J.M.W. Turner observed natural elements including light, weather, water, mist, and storm. However, they did not only copy what they saw, they used color, atmosphere, and composition to communicate emotion. Caspar David Friedrich also used natural landscapes such as mountains, fogs, forest, and the sea to create feeling of solitude, wonder, and imagination.
These artists show that observation can turn real environment into emotional spaces.
I applied this understanding to my project by observing my brother's work from home routine. I focused on how he continuously shifts between professional work, household responsibility, and rest. I noticed that his day often feels repetitive, almost like he is trapped in the same cycle. Small objects become important symbols in my work. For example, the laptop represents work, pressure, and responsibility, while the bed represents rest and becomes a gateway into his inner world. Before shooting, I visualized the scene I want to create and wrote description of each shot in a text format. This helped me plan the action, objects, emotional tone, and visual style of the project. Then I photographed the scene and used the still images rather than continuous video footage. This was a deliberate choice because still images slow down time and make the viewer observe each object and moment more carefully. They also support the idea that his routine feels paused, repetitive, and stuck. In post production, I used After Effects to edit images into moving sequence. I used timing, transition, pacing, and dynamic sound to create movement and emotional change from still photograph. The sound is important because it gives energy and rhythm to the images, helping the audience feel the pressure and repetition of the day. The main work is presented in black and white. I use this color treatment to communicate monotony, tiredness, and lack of freedom within his daily responsibilities. The reduced color palette makes the work feel more confined and emotionally drained. I also added cinematic bar to this scene. The bar create a narrower frame, suggesting that his restricted routine and unable to move beyond his work and course. The dream sequence changes into color because it represents a different emotional world. In this part, he dreams about going to the beach and taking a break from his responsibilities. Color represents creativity, hope, imagination, and freedom he wants in real life. During post production, I removed the cinematic bars from the sequence using a very small transition animation. The visual change make the frame feel more wider, more open, showing that his imagination is not limited in the same way as his everyday life.
Overall, the project creates an emotional journey from energy at the start of the work to exhaustion due to the repeated responsibilities and finally escaping through dreams when he is going to sleep. It uses the observed details from an ordinary home environment to communicate a wide range of pressure, routine, and the need for personal freedom.
A related work is Gitanjali Rao's animated film Printed Rainbow, which presents an elderly woman's quiet and repetitive everyday life. Her work is shown in black and white, while her imaginative world she enters through a matchbox is colorful and expressive. This influenced my use of black and white for routine and color for imagination, allowing the contrast between reality and escape to become clearer.
This week's theme is tinkering. I understand tinkering as learning through curiosity, play, and experimentation. It means working with materials, objects, or a digital tool without being fully sure of the final result. Rather than following a fixed plan, the process involves testing out ideas, making changes, and allowing unexpected outcome to guide the work.
This approach can be seen in Marshall Duchamp's bicycle wheel, where he combined a bicycle wheel and a stool to create a new type of artwork from ordinary objects. It can also be seen in the collage experimentation of Pablo Picasso and George Barat, who introduced materials such as newspaper, wallpaper, and printed paper into their painting. These works show how experimenting with available material can lead to new visual ideas.
For my response, I explored how lighting and composition can create storytelling in a 3D scene. I created two scenes in Blender and chose not to texture the object in detail.
Instead, I experimented with lighting to see how it can reveal forms, control the viewer's focus, and build atmosphere. This helped me understand the lighting can communicate emotion and narration even when the objects are visually simple. I did not begin with fixed or final image or video in mind. Rather, I explored different light position, brightness levels, camera angles, and composition choices throughout the process. Then I reused asset which I created long back in some of my personal project to chalk out an idea. The final outcome developed through testing and responding to the result which connects directly to the idea of tinkering. I also applied the rule of thirds from the class to make the composition more engaging. For example, I placed horizon line along the lower grid, leaving more space in the frame and directing attention towards the environment. After producing two montage shots, I created a seamless transition between them to make the sequence feel more active and connected. Finally, I added text to give scenes further context and suggest a story. A related reference is the mission brief sequence of IO Interactive Hitman. It uses cinematic composition, controlling controlled frames, transition, lighting, and text to provide information while creating a particular mood. Although it is not specifically a tinkering project, it helped me consider how these visual elements can work together to strengthen storytelling.
This week's theme is found object. I understand a found object as something that can give a new purpose beyond its original function. For example, a paper can be used for writing, but it can also become an origami plane. Then discarded metal can also become a sculptural installation which can be used in galleries. The value of an object changes when an artist reuses it, reinterprets it, place it in a completely different context or environment. For my response, I explored how photograph or map can be transformed into a game mechanic.
I used a Google Map screenshot showing the route from my brother in law's home to Thomastown. This route is meaningful to me because my brother drives me to the station on Monday morning and I regularly observe the traffic congestion on my way to the university. I transformed this everyday map image into a playable route in Unity. Based on my experience of the journey, I divided the lane in three different colors: red for heavy traffic or slow movement, orange for moderate traffic and medium speed, and white for clearer lanes and faster movement. The player must travel from point A, the home, to point B, Thomastown Station, within a span of 60 seconds. The game has three endings. If the player chooses not to travel, they stay home and sleep. If they move through the traffic efficiently, then they reach the station on time. If they are delayed by slow traffic, then they will arrive late and Chris will be upset for their late entry to the class. These different endings make the everyday journey feel like a game, where traffic choices affect the outcome. A visual reference is Piet Mondrian's Broadway Boogie Woogie, 1942 to 43. Mondrian transformed the street and movement of Manhattan into an abstract grid of yellow, red, blue, and grey. Similarly, I turned a real travel route into a simplified visual system of color lens and movement. Other useful found object reference work includes like Marshall Duchamp's Fountain, 1917, where a manufactured urinal was presented as a art, showing that context can completely change an object's meaning. Then the second one can be Google Map based art projections such as Jeremy Wood's Mic Host, which uses GPS movement data to create drawings from real journeys. This is relevant because it changes navigation information into a creative visual form.
This fifth theme is place. I understand place as more than just a setting. It can hold history, memory, identity, cultural meaning. In my work, architecture becomes a character that tells a story without actually using a physical person. I used Melbourne's Old Treasury building for its Victorian architectural style. I'm not connecting this building directly to India. Instead, I used its Victorian feature as a visual reference to explore how Victorian architecture became a part of Kolkata during the colonial rule and transformed into another unique style architecture after independence, while using the learning of design from its predecessor.
This work uses the idea of pendulum theory from art, that is, moving back and forth between the past and present. The Treasury building exists in the present day Melbourne, while the animated projection tells the historical and changing story of Victorian architecture in Kolkata. This brings Melbourne and Kolkata into one visual space. Raymond Williams' theory helped me explain this. Victorian architecture in Kolkata is residual culture because it comes from the past but is still visible today. Present day Kolkata is the dominant culture shaping how these old buildings are used and understood. New ways of interpreting historical architecture through art, technology, and heritage are emergent culture.
I created a 3D model of the old Treasury building in Blender, made UV snapshots, and designed 3D animated texture using After Effects and Photoshop. Using the area light, I did projection mapping on the 3D model.
Red represents intensity and conflict, while blue represents positive change, and orange represents changing food habits and everyday culture. A real example is the Vivid Sydney projection shown at the Sydney Opera House. During the festival, animated colors, patterns, and stories are projected onto the building's surface. The Opera House remains the same physical structure, but projection mapping gives it a new visual identity and allows it to communicate different ideas. This relates to my work because I also used projection mapping to turn the old Treasury building into a surface for visual storytelling.
Firstly, I learned that everyday observation can turn simple objects, routines, and places into meaningful stories. Secondly, I learned to experiment freely with lighting, composition, material, and digital tool without needing a fixed outcome. Thirdly, I learned that found objects, places, and architecture can be reinterpreted to create interactive and visual work. And fourth, most importantly, I learned that color, sound, movement, and space can communicate emotion, history, and cultural change. Out of all the project this month, I really liked the project which had the theme called Place because I feel comfortable working in 3D modeling. Especially, I do love doing environment modeling and environment design. And I spent most of my time doing research on Raymond's William idea on culture and Victorian architecture and how it affected or transformed from the colonial rule to the present day. So I enjoyed doing all this kind of research along with merging my Blender skills, animation, and projection mapping to create a work that connects architecture, history, and visual storytelling.